Today we're going to take a little peek at the rivals of Weekly Shonen Jump. Magazines that deserve equal recognition and are filled with great manga, but lack the spotlight on them that Jump has. This won't be a comprehensive look at each magazine, but a brief look into them, my experience with them, and my overall thoughts. In the future though, I think it would be a lot of fun to delve into them in the same way I do with Jump currently, but I'll go into more detail about that at the end of this video. First off though, what exactly makes a magazine a rival to Weekly Shonen Jump? You could say a lot of different manga magazines are competitors to it, including overseas publications like Webtoon or Saturday AM, but to narrow it down we'll be focusing on the three most notable shonen magazines that run weekly in Japan besides Weekly Shonen Jump. If there are others you think are worthy of the title of rival, let me know in the comments and maybe we'll do this again for some other magazines, but for now the three magazines we'll be looking at are Weekly Shonen Sunday, Weekly Shonen Magazine, and Weekly Shonen Champion. The reason I've chosen these three are because they're shonen manga magazines like Jump. They're traditionally aimed at younger boys, they're all weekly magazines, and they're also all published by different parent companies, kind of, but we won't get into the specifics here. They also all have distinct characteristics, and generally each magazine has their own vibe. And while Shonen Champion isn't as popular as the other two, I wanted to include it anyway to add a bit more variety to this video. I'll also be using shorthand to refer to these magazines. Shonen Jump is Jump, Magazine will just be Magazine sometimes, Shonen Sunday will be Sunday, and Shonen Champion is Champion. An interesting thing to note is that each of these magazines also has a flagship series that goes beyond 1,000 chapters, and each are very different, but we'll talk about each of them when I get to them in their respective sections. Another thing to bring up before we start is, while I do see these magazines as rivals to Jump, the conversation surrounding this video won't be about which magazine is better, but more an exploration into how different each one of them are. More like what is each magazine known for and maybe what their strengths are. And we'll also be looking at a small selection of manga from each too, their flagship series or biggest one, a newcomer, and a currently running very popular one. And with all that explanation and background out of the way, let's start with the largest of the three, Weekly Shonen Magazine. Weekly Shonen Magazine would debut in 1959, almost a full decade before Weekly Shonen Jump would begin its run, and it's considered its biggest rival. It originally was at the top of the manga world at one point before Jump dethroned it, but magazine would take the top spot again between 1997 and 2002 though, after Jump lost all of its heavy hitters like Dragon Ball in 1996 and then Slam Dunk. It would take a while before other hits like One Piece would help Jump regain its crown once again. And even though magazine isn't as well known in the West, its history and the fight to put up against Shonen Jump is commendable and shows it's a worthy rival. The first thing you might notice that's different compared to Shonen Jump and some other manga magazines are the covers of Weekly Shonen Magazine. The majority of them feature idols instead of the actual manga. Magazine's covers in general are fascinating, with them changing considerably throughout the years to match trends. I could make a whole video on the topic honestly, but some old ones caught my eye, especially the ones with Ultraman on. These days though, magazine is covered with very pretty ladies, which I think differentiates it to Jump a ton. At least in the West, kids magazines don't really have titties slapped all over them, which I think is an easy way to show that magazine is aimed at an audience that's a bit older than Jump generally. More the older teen to college crowd, I think. This is supplemented by magazine having a staggering number of romance or rom-com manga running currently. In total, there are 10 romance manga or manga with a strong romantic element running in the magazine, which include Rent a Girlfriend, A Couple of Cuckoos, The Cafe Terrace and Its Goddesses, and many more, basically half the magazine. Magazine's currently longest running manga isn't a romance though, with it being the highly acclaimed boxing manga Hajime no Ippo. I haven't yet taken the full pilgrimage necessary to read it, but from the little I have read, it's an excellent sports series, and I bet Ippo and Friends' progression is an absolute joy to behold. It's currently in its 1400s in terms of chapter count, and started all the way back in 1989, and is one of the longest and best-selling manga of all time. While Ippo may be a featherweight, this manga is surely a heavyweight of the manga industry. Now shifting focus to one of Magazine's newest manga, which is yet again not a rom-com, but a shogi manga called Orion's Board. Yuhi Ninomiya was once a prodigy at shogi, but now suffers a 17-game losing streak, and in his despair, his grip on the shogi world is weakening. This is a series still in its infancy, and we join the main character at an interesting point in their career, a major slump, but it makes the story quite gripping in my opinion. Instead of jumping straight into the games in the actual shogi, it's more focused on setting up its characters, especially the main character, who I think is really compelling in his reasons for playing shogi and for stopping. I can't really comment on if it will survive or how good it will be in the future, but I'm glad Magazine is serializing a shogi manga, and I think this one is definitely worth checking out. And we can't talk about Weekly Shonen Magazine without mentioning Blue Lock, the polarizing football manga that's taken the manga world by storm in recent years. Maybe it's mostly a Shonen Jump thing, but sports manga haven't really had a big hit for a while, with Blue Lock being I think the most notable one recently, and its unorthodox approach to sports manga with its setup and characters might be part of that. Instead of focusing on teamwork and friendship, it looks into egoism, where every character is out for themselves. It's delightful to read, and I think part of that is because of how over the top it is, and different to a lot of other sports series. It's something new that's blazing its own trail. It also helps that it's full of super pretty boys that complements its absurdness really well. Even when Shonen Magazine decides to be the most straight out of all Jump's rivals, with its 10 rom-coms, it also possesses the most gay manga by far, which I think is really funny and ironic. And the next of Jump's rivals is Shonen Champion, which would debut in July of 1969, 10 years after Magazine, and a year or so after Shonen Jump. But even with it being the new kid on the block, Champion managed to nab mangaka very popular at the time, including Osamu Tezuka, who would serialize among other works Blackjack in the magazine, cementing itself as an instant rival to the three. While Champion wouldn't remain quite as big and now is on the lower end in terms of circulation numbers and popularity, it did give Jump some serious competition in the 70s, but has remained smaller than it and the other two magazines we're talking about today. Champion is also a bit looser in terms of content, with some manga veering a bit more adult, which is reflected in a slogan they once used briefly that described the magazine as an open-ended manga magazine where anything goes. Champion is the host to a lot of weirder manga, but its sports scene has always been relatively healthy, thanks to long-running works like Dokaben, a baseball series that with its sequels is the second longest running in the world, right after Golgo 13. Yowamushi Pedal is an ongoing bicycle racing manga that is at the 90 volume mark and still ongoing, and Baki is also on the top 10 longest in terms of volume count and is still currently ongoing too. While these aren't as well known compared to some other sports manga, all of them have done well to last this long and give the magazine a distinct sporty flavour in my opinion. Speaking of Baki, it's the manga I'd point to as the long runner of Shonen Champion, starting all the way back in 1991 and having multiple sequel series running in the magazine since, with the newest one starting in 2023. If you're unfamiliar with Baki, well, it's one of the most batshit insane things you could ever read, stretching the very idea of human capability and potential in its bizarre martial arts focused world. The manga translation was a bit all over the place when I first started to read it, which may have changed now, but with the new anime, it's pretty accessible to see parts of the story, and just jumping in at any point is honestly a joy. I also find it very endearing that the author of Baki, Keisuke Itagaki's daughter, Haru Itagaki, also has manga that have run in the magazine, and they're equally as weird as her dad's, with her currently serializing Sanda in the magazine that's set to end soon. They are also the creator of Beastars, so you know they're a little bit freaky. Haruo no Onmyoji is one of Champion's newer manga, and unfortunately in comparison to the other two magazines, choices in Champion are quite slim as even less is translated. This is an exorcism manga with a slight twist. The main character early on decides to defect from their main organization since he's friends with a penguin-like Kuregari, this manga's yokai or monster alternative. What follows is a pretty edgy take on the exorcism formula. I wouldn't say it gets super dark or anything, but it definitely reminds me of young adult novels. A part of that is due to the MC running away and joining a group of friendly kurogari, so it ends up being this group of teens angstily hanging out and battling with exorcists. This is also the most juvenile manga on the list in terms of its plot and also its art, as it's pretty minimal at times and sketchy, but it has this trashy quality to it that I did enjoy. I will say though, if there was anything else that was newer other than this that had a bunch of chapters, I probably would have talked about that instead, but this had up-to-date translations, so it seemed fitting I take a look at it. One manga I definitely recommend checking out from Champion though is Welcome to Demon School Iruma. The manga follows Iruma, a human boy who one day ends up the adopted grandson of the demon Sullivan. He attends school, meets friends, attends classes, and does pretty much anything you'd ever want from a fantasy school manga. While it has classic battle shonen elements, it puts a greater emphasis on the characters being children in a school setting. So you get arcs where they have different festivals, exams, and school trips, and it gradually builds on overarching political story on top of all of this. But its core strength lies in its characters and Iruma's ability to be the sweetest cinnamon roll ever. It's such a joy and surprise to see it go from its humble beginnings to where it is now 300 plus chapters later, to this rich, fully fleshed out world with amazing characters and artwork. It's great that among some of the more visceral and edgy manga like Baki and Hiro no Onmyoji, we have things like Iruma in Champion 2, perhaps one of the most pure manga to ever exist, and it gives Champion as a magazine a very interesting and distinct feeling to it with these contrasting elements. And finally, we have Weekly Shonen Sunday, which, like Weekly Shonen Magazine, also began in 1959. And contrary to its name, it actually releases every Wednesday. The namesake of Weekly Shonen Sunday comes from its very first editor-in-chief, the magazine Kichi Toyoda, who wanted readers to have the feeling you'd get on a Sunday of having a relaxing weekend. I think that's really appropriate too, as out of all three of these magazines and Jump, Sunday feels the most laid back and deviates from battle manga a bit more. It would be known for its gag and later romance manga in the 70s and 80s, with works like Touch and Urusei Yatsura ushering in a new wave of popularity that helped it rival Jump for a period, which makes a lot of sense to me, as pre-1983, Jump was filled with a lot more softer romantic works, with Stop Hirari-kun being a big headliner for them. It's interesting to learn that this was most likely influenced by Sunday and its history. Researching for this video has helped me connect some dots in some really cool ways, and I'm really looking forward to doing more of this in the future. I've also read that Sunday is a little bit more hands-off in their editorial process and tends to let its manga run their course a bit more, having less manga that end abruptly like its contemporaries. Its readership is also a bit older, and there are a lot more female readers unlike the other magazines, again likely to the swath of romance manga, as well as it having a more laid back and mature feel in general. The manga serialized within Sunday reflect this too, with its currently longest running and flagship manga being Detective Conan or Case Closed. Unlike One Piece, Ippo or Baki, there is substantially less fighting going on in Conan, with it being a detective manga instead of a battle or sports series. I haven't committed to the insane task of catching up to it, but I am reading it currently, and the beginning is surprisingly gripping, and I'm looking forward to reading it more, as I'm a big fan of procedural mystery orientated shows. The cases Conan goes through are really fun, and the art is genuinely great. There was also even a Columbo reference early on, which I really enjoyed. Further showing Sunday's more relaxed side, we have Ogami Sumiki to Kinichijo, and readers of Ruri Dragon might find another fun manga here, as it's a slice of life series about a werewolf girl. This features substantially more monster characters and doesn't quite capture Ruri's dry wit, but it's very cute and enjoyable nonetheless. Sumiki is a great little character, and it feels like it might delve into more of a romance angle as time goes on, and I for one am very happy if this, alongside Ruri, sparks a trend in us having more Monster Girl series. And last but certainly not least for Sunday, we have Frieren Beyond Journey's End. Frieren is an engaging and frankly beautiful take on the fantasy genre, following the titular elf as she goes on a new journey after defeating the Demon King. This time though, she reflects on her life and the lives of others and the meaning and importance of it all. It has an interesting relationship with time too, flitting back and forth between Frieren's past with best boy Himmel, I love him so much,
They grow pretty heroes too.
and then to the present with her new companions in Fern and Stark. While a substantial portion is devoted to fantasy aspects, its world, setting up various mages, and having some shonen staples like an exam arc, Frieren excels in its quieter and more emotional moments. It's much slower and more reflective than any manga you might think of when the word shonen is brought up, and that's partially due to people's preconceptions with what the demographic is, but I think it's also a show of Frieren's individuality and what makes it special. It's so popular in part because it's telling a story through a lens we don't often see, and also I can't really recall too many popular fantasy manga as of recent that have worlds like Frieren's. If you can't tell, I absolutely adore Frieren, and this video is in part an excuse to gush about it a little bit, but I also think it's very fitting it's a Sunday manga, being one of the more relaxing and warm stories I've ever experienced, which is very much in line with what Sunday is about as a magazine. And with that, we've explored a tiny part of Shonen Jump's rival magazines. This is a topic that often gets requested of me to cover since I'm so Jump focused, and it's not that I dislike these magazines or anything. In fact, I'd love to cover them more and read more manga. I just love Jump so much I end up talking about it way more than anything else. It's also easier to research and to support officially because of the infrastructure it's built up already in the West, having apps that are widely available and fairly priced. It also helps a ton that the entire magazine is simulpubbed every week too, which isn't the case for Jump's rivals yet. With that said though, they all have their own rich histories and manga I'd love to read, so as a reward for those who've made it this far, let's try to do something fun. In the description will be a poll where you can vote for one of these three magazines. Whichever one wins, I'll do my best to read at least part of every series currently running and make a follow-up video on it, going through the winning magazine's entire roster. I think it would be fun to touch on these magazines again as well in between my coverage of Jump. I'd love to use this as a springboard to help me read and learn more from different magazines, as well as help others get interested in all the other manga they offer, in hopes they get unofficial or official translations, so we can enjoy even more manga. I hope this explains why I didn't go too in-depth with some manga or didn't mention some big popular titles like Ranger Reject, Gachiakuta, Eden Zero, or Komi-san. I want this to be me opening the gates for further discussion and exploration into these magazines for the future. I really hope you enjoyed this little dive into Jump's rival magazines, but if you want more videos of me talking about manga, I've also got you covered, so make sure you subscribe and check out my various series, including the history of Shonen Jump, where I delve into the magazine's history from the very beginning in 1968. Or if you'd like smaller videos on more contemporary manga, check out my Axe File series where I look at Shonen Jump's cancelled manga in a bit more depth. If you really like these videos and what I make, please consider supporting me on Patreon, where you can be thanked at the end of my videos with a little doodle like Kinocha, Cody, Kaizuku Gairu, Sora Cool Zero, and Harley the Apothecary. Thank you all for supporting me and the things I make. And as always, I hope you enjoyed, remember to be kind, and take care.